Thank you, Laska Herlock, and I suppose I want to endorse and thank you, Minister, for coming to the House. And I do concur with what Senator Boyhan was saying in terms of your support to this House and everything it's doing. But I also want to, I suppose, support what he's saying in terms of Fine Gael senators coming in here day after day, week after week, pointing out all the gaps. Can you just imagine what they'd do if they were in government? Wow. Wouldn't it just be fantastic? But no, I meant Fine Gael. No, I meant Fine Gael. I'm coming to Fianna Fáil.
Oh, very good. Well, I was waiting for it.
But I meant Fine Gael.
Let's stick to the budget. Let's stick to the finance bill.
It's all about finance, but you know, day after day we have to listen to that. We should have more of that, and we should have more of the other.
Sorry, Senator Conway-Walsh has the floor to discuss the finance bill.
So. And I'm trying to imagine what things would be like if Fine Gael were in government. So anyway,
we are in government at the moment.
Minister,
Senator Lawler.
Pull the plug on the government up.
Sorry, excuse me, Senator Conway, would you continue?
Don't be hypocritical.
On the finance bill, please.
Minister, the budget and the subsequent finance bill is a time when people should be able to see clearly where the priorities of any government lie. This year, thousands of workers and families across the state were desperately looking for a well-deserved and a long-awaited break. They were looking for something, indeed anything, that would enable them to feel less worried about how they were going to meet the ever-increasing costs they have to meet every week and every month. Higher rental, mortgage, childcare, health, education, travel, heating and, of course, insurance, as you're very familiar with. They hoped that Brexit wouldn't be used as an excuse to say, no, nothing for you again this year. Just one more year of resilience and carrying the burden. Yes, and I wrote it Saturday night about 12 o'clock.
Good for you.
I did, after speaking to constituents all day who are suffering under this government. And it is really important that they have a voice here. We ask them time and time again to carry the burden, and we will see what can be done for next year. This is, of course, what you're saying to them when they return you to power with our ever-compliant partners in Fianna Fáil. After all, we've told you enough times, we are the responsible party. We know everything there needed to be known about economics. Indeed, there is no alternative. But to keep us in the positions we have become accustomed to, there is just no alternative for people but to keep putting you back in power. Now, at committee stage next week, we will be discussing the detail of the finance bill. So today, I want to cover a few aspects of how I believe that you have failed to give ordinary workers and families a break, despite us being the fastest growing economy in Europe. So we have Brexit, yes, and there's problems and there's challenges around it, but we are the fastest growing economy in Europe. So firstly, let's look at the carbon tax levied on households and drivers who can least afford it, and those of us living in rural Ireland. Since 2010, we have paid €3.35 billion in carbon tax. Last year alone, this government collected €435 million. None of this has been ring-fenced for climate action measures. Now, I welcome what you've said in your statement about 90 million, I think it was, going to be ring-fenced this year. But in all of that time, it's failed to reduce emissions. So adding on to the carbon tax that's there will not do that. Now, Britain doesn't have a carbon tax. Yet its emissions have decreased. You say that you want to change behaviour, but you don't provide the alternatives in public transport, in renewable energy and in proper investment in rural Ireland. Now let's compare the extension of the tax breaks for multinational executives against the treatment of the average paid workers and farmers. SARP, which is the little-known scheme that enables wealthy executives to write off 1/3 of their salary against income tax. This means that a multinational executive who moves to Dublin on a salary of €1 million per annum can avoid more than €123,000 in tax, which anybody else would have to pay. Now contrast that to a small farmer whose payments are delayed due to a computer glitch and run over into the new year. Not only is he under severe financial stress at not being able to pay his bills, he's taxed on the 2 payments within 1 financial year, which obviously means that his tax liability is increased through no fault of his own. So there's no SARP for him or for his family. So he will be worse off, while someone earning 1 million will be better off by 123,000. Where's the tax justice in that? And where's the fairness in that? Other workers will have to pay a tax of 40% on their salary above the standard rate band, which these multimillionaire executives will only pay 28% above the standard rate of tax. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Based on the cost of this tax break in recent years, it's likely to cost the Irish people 100 million next year. We could have increased the number of apprenticeships by 5,000 at a cost of 35.8 million. We could have cleared the home help waiting lists entirely for 59 million. And we could have reinstated the rehabilitative training allowance, which was cruelly taken away from people with disabilities trying to access training and education, for just the cost of 3.7 million. And we would still have had 1.5 million left over. So the choice was to give more to millionaire executives or create equality of opportunity and protect the vulnerable. And you were supported by Fianna Fáil in doing that. But this government, ably assisted by Fianna Fáil, choose those who you're closest to, those who have the most. Despite all of the expert advice on another measure, the government and Fianna Fáil decided to extend the Help to Buy scheme for another 2 years. In section 15 of this bill, at a cost of another 100 million in 2020 alone, that is 40 million more than was allocated for additional social housing. More than 1/5 of houses that were bought through the scheme were bought at a cost of more than 35,000. Worse still, 40% of the people who availed of this tax break already had the 10% deposit that was needed to get the mortgage to buy the house. That 40% equates to 40 million that was handed out to people who did not need it to get a deposit to buy a house. And yet Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil think that the money is better spent in their pockets than it would have been spent in reaching out to people who don't know where they're going to be sleeping this Christmas. It is wrong. It is wrong on so many levels. This is not an affordable housing scheme, no matter what way it's wrapped up. The report by the Parliamentary Budget Office made it quite clear that it has done nothing to reduce house prices and has failed to help low and middle income earners onto the property ladder. I do welcome the move in the bill to heed Sinn Féin's call to tackle the serious tax avoidance among the property investors through REITs and IREFs. Particularly the provisions of the Section 28, which seems to close the re-evaluation loophole that was present upon REIT cessation by requiring that the relevant REIT must be in operation for over 15 years before enjoying preferential treatment. But I would make the point that there should not be a CGT exemption, even if REIT was in operation after 15 years. If these properties are sold to a company after that time, the REIT should still not avail of CGT exemption. Section 60 seems to close the tax loophole on the stamp duty that has existed for investors for far too long, despite Sinn Féin's insistence that it be closed. The provisions of this bill do not go far enough. Property investors have for too long been allowed to aggressively invest in property and avoid serious tax. They should be subject to the new 7.5% of the commercial stamp duty like everybody else. So if somebody buys a local shop in Belmullet or Ballina, they have to pay the 7.5% stamp duty, but while others are exempt from it. Now, at committee stage, I will examine in detail some of the lost opportunities that could have been made to give workers and families a badly needed break. Minister, I'm really disappointed, and an awful lot of people are really disappointed with this bill. People are really struggling out there. They're struggling on a weekly and monthly basis just to exist. And it shouldn't be like that when we're the fastest growing economy in Europe.
Okay, thanks, Senator.